Good morning and welcome to this morning's reflection. Yesterday, or it wasn't yesterday, it was actually on Friday, we looked at Jesus as we might have encountered him before Christianity. And the question is, who is this man? Who is Jesus? We get a lot of our information about Jesus from the four Gospels. And we need to realize that the Gospels, they're not biographies. They were not intended to be biographies. The purpose was to show how Jesus could be relevant to the people who lived outside of Palestine a generation or two after his death. This first generation of Christians did not need an exact biography of Jesus' life, because they really wanted to know how Jesus might be relevant to their life circumstances. And we, in many ways, seek the same thing today. An exact chronicle of places, dates, and names seldom allows a historical figure to come to life again for later generations. The Gospels are much better at telling what Jesus had to offer the people of Palestine in his time. So, who was Jesus? Who was Jesus? If we look carefully, we can uncover a great deal about him. The Gospels make use of sources that go back to Jesus and his contemporaries. It is even possible to capture his actual words and to retrace what he did and where he did it. All of that is valuable, but what is far more important is to uncover Jesus' original intention. If we want to try to discover his intention, it will be helpful to know how his contemporaries lived and how they thought and how they reacted to him. The question is, what was Jesus trying to do? What did he hope to achieve for the people amongst whom he worked? Now, one of the best ways to answer this question is to look for evidence of his decisions and his choices. And we have a case of this at the very beginning of all the Gospels. Jesus chose to be baptized by John. He aligned himself with John by this choice, with John rather than any other movement of the time. So how was John different from his contemporaries? To understand this is to understand the direction of Jesus' thinking. The Romans had colonized Palestine in 63 BC. They made Herod, who was the most powerful claimant, king of the Jews, which was their normal way of doing things by making a local person a puppet king. Jesus was born during his reign. When Herod died, his kingdom was divided up amongst his sons. Herod Archelaus was given Judea and Samaria, Herod Antipas, Galilee and Perea, and Herod Philip received the northern regions. Archelaus could not cope with the restless and discontented people, And so the Romans became concerned, and not in a compassionate way. Their concern led them to depose Archelaus and to send a Roman procurator to govern Judea and Samaria. Jesus would have been about 12 years old at the time. This was the beginning of direct Roman rule, the beginning of the last and most turbulent period in the history of the Jewish nation. A time which ended in the almost total destruction of the temple, the city, and the nation in 70 AD, and then their complete destruction in 135 AD. This is the period in which Jesus lived and died, and it is during this period that the early church began. The period began with rebellion. There was a rebellion over the issue of tax. The Romans had begun to take a census so that they might know the resources that were available to them. The Jews objected to this census on religious grounds. So, a rebellion arose, led by Judas the Galilean, and he had founded a group of religious freedom fighters. The Romans stopped this first rebellion, and as a warning, crucified no fewer than 2,000 rebels. But the movement continued. Well, of course it did. When will people learn that violence never stops violence? And so the Jews called them zealots. The Romans called them bandits. They were an underground movement, and for 60 years they harassed the Roman army. Eventually, they developed from a group of rebels into a revolutionary army. Then, in 66 AD, they overthrew the Romans. But 4 years later, Rome destroyed them at Masada. And so this is the backdrop to Jesus' life. But notice, he does not choose the military approach. He does not come to assert human power. If he had, he would have given his support to the zealots. But no, he chose John the Baptist. Jesus was not trying to establish an earthly kingdom. He was not here to defend a faith through violence. He was here for a very different reason, as evidenced in his allowing John the Baptist to baptize him. And we will continue this tomorrow. Bless you, and take care today.